It was one of those cozy evenings I used to love. Candles flickering, the smell of roasted garlic in the air, and that quiet comfort of sharing dinner with someone who once felt like home. But that night, something about Thomas's smile made my stomach tighten. "You know, Izzy," he said, swirling his wine like he'd just discovered the meaning of life, "I've been reading some fascinating stuff lately. About freedom in love." Freedom in love. I remember laughing softly and saying, "Sounds like a TED Talk waiting to go wrong." I was joking, but part of me already knew something real was about to unravel. He laughed too, a little too loudly, a little too proud of himself. "No, seriously," he said, leaning in. "These psychologists say monogamy is outdated, that we hold each other back." I froze mid-bite. The same man who once wrote me love letters about forever was now quoting strangers on the internet about evolving. I looked at him, steady and sharp. "And let me guess," I said. "This revelation came after one of your late nights with your new coworkers?" My voice was calm, but my pulse wasn't. He sighed dramatically, like I was the one ruining the moment. "Why do you always assume the worst, Izzy? I'm just saying, maybe we've evolved past jealousy." That word, evolved, hit me like a slap. I smiled, but inside, I felt something cold spreading through me. He wasn't exploring new ideas. He was building excuses. I didn't say it out loud then, but I knew it. This was the start of something I'd have to finish on my own terms. After that dinner, his words wouldn't leave me alone. They followed me as I washed the dishes, as I folded laundry, even as I tried to sleep beside him. Freedom in love. He said it so casually, like it was wisdom instead of warning. I kept replaying the moment in my mind, his smirk, the certainty in his tone, the ease with which he dismantled everything we'd built. He made it sound like love was a cage, and I was the one keeping him locked inside. Funny thing was, he didn't seem to notice the door had always been open. The next morning, he kissed my cheek before leaving for work, like nothing had changed. I stood there in my robe, watching his car pull out of the driveway, realizing how much distance could exist in a single heartbeat. The man who once promised forever now spoke in theories and loopholes, and yet, part of me wanted to believe him, to think maybe he was just confused, experimenting with ideas like people do with diets. But deep down, I felt it. This wasn't curiosity, this was preparation. That night, as I sat on the couch scrolling through my phone, I saw him in the reflection of the TV, smiling at a message, his thumb moving quickly before he locked the screen. He didn't see me watching. He didn't notice the silence thickening between us like fog. I told myself not to jump to conclusions, but every woman knows that moment. The quiet before the truth knocks the air out of you. And I could already feel the first gust of it coming. That weekend, he brought it up again, over breakfast this time, as if the idea had become part of his morning routine. "You know, Izzy," he said between sips of coffee, "people our age should be more open-minded. Love isn't supposed to be restrictive." I just stared at the steam rising from my cup, trying to find warmth in it. "Restrictive?" I asked softly. "Or loyal?" He chuckled, brushing it off like I was the one being dramatic. "It's not about cheating," he said. "It's about freedom. About growth." Growth. Another pretty word to disguise decay. I nodded, pretending to listen, but inside, something hardened. I could almost see the threads snapping one by one, the ones that once tied his words to sincerity. Every smile he gave me now looked rehearsed. Every touch felt borrowed. It wasn't that I didn't understand what he was saying. It was that he didn't believe it himself. He just needed me to. Because guilt sounds nobler when you dress it as philosophy. Later that night, when he fell asleep, I sat in the dark and stared at him. The man I loved looked peaceful, innocent even, but the air between us had changed. It carried the weight of something unspoken, a confession in progress. And as the clock ticked quietly beside the bed, I made myself a silent promise. If he was rewriting the rules, I'd learn to play his game better than he ever could. Over the next few days, his ideas became our new dinner guest, uninvited but ever present. Thomas started dropping quotes from podcasts I'd never heard of, citing experts who preached the liberation of love. He sounded so sure of himself, as if he'd discovered a truth too profound for ordinary people to grasp. "Don't you think trust means letting each other experience life fully?" he asked one night, watching me carefully. I smiled politely, stirring my tea. "Trust," I said, "also means not needing to look elsewhere for fulfillment." My voice was calm, but my heart was pounding. He leaned back, exhaling in frustration, like a teacher disappointed in a slow student. "You don't get it," he said. "I'm not saying I want to cheat. I just think we should evolve." That word again, evolve. I'd begun to hate it. "Evolve into what?" I asked quietly. "A man who wants permission to betray me without guilt?" For a moment, the mask slipped. He froze, just for a second, before forcing out a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "You always twist my words, Izzy." "That's not what I meant." But I'd heard the truth in his hesitation. That night, the silence in our bedroom was suffocating. I turned away from him, pretending to sleep, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. His phone buzzed twice on the nightstand. He didn't move. I waited until his breathing steadied, then glanced at the screen. "Leah, work." My stomach turned. I didn't open it, not yet. I just stared at that name glowing in the dark. Something inside me shifted again. Not fear this time, but clarity. Whatever he was becoming, I'd already started to see the man behind the philosophy. By the third day, he'd turned our living room into a lecture hall. He'd quote relationship coaches between bites of dinner, showing me charts and studies on his phone like he was presenting research instead of betrayal. "Open marriages create stronger bonds," he said one night, pacing like a visionary. I watched him from the sofa, my hands folded neatly on my lap. "Stronger for whom?" I asked. He blinked, thrown off. "For both people, obviously." "Or just for the one already breaking the rules?" I countered. He smiled, thin and tense. The kind of smile people wear when they've already decided to lie. I started to notice patterns. The way he'd get defensive if I didn't respond enthusiastically. How he'd suddenly become charming afterward, offering to cook dinner or pour wine. Manipulation disguised as affection. I played along, nodding at his theories, asking questions as though I were curious. Inside, I was dissecting every word. Freedom, evolution, trust. He rotated them like keys, trying to unlock the guilt he knew was coming. He wasn't enlightening me. He was rehearsing his confession. That night, as I walked past the study, I heard him on the phone. His tone soft, intimate, almost pleading. "She's not ready for the idea yet. Give me time." And my heart didn't race this time. It just settled. The kind of stillness that comes when the storm finally breaks. I stood there in the hallway, watching his shadow on the wall, and realized something quietly devastating. The man who once couldn't keep secrets from me now couldn't tell the truth to anyone but her. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there beside him, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. Steady, peaceful, oblivious. The ceiling looked different somehow, as if the truth had changed the shape of the room. I thought about every time I'd defended him, every excuse I'd made in his name. It was strange, realizing that the man I loved was no longer my husband in spirit, just a familiar presence wearing his face. His body was here, but everything else had already left. At some point, I got out of bed and walked to the kitchen. The tiles were cold under my feet, and I could still hear his voice in my head. Soft, persuasive, rehearsed. "Give me time." Time for what? To break me down gently? To make betrayal sound like growth? I made tea, though I never drank it. I just needed to hear the sound of something boiling, something honest. I remember staring at the steam curling upward, thinking it looked like the last bit of warmth escaping from us. By morning, I had made a quiet promise to myself. I would no longer ask him for honesty. I would find it myself. Whatever this new philosophy of his was, it wouldn't be his secret much longer. He thought he was guiding me toward enlightenment, but all he'd really done was open my eyes. And what I saw now, I could never unsee. It started with a name. Leah, work. 2 words that looked innocent enough, but I knew better. I'd seen the way he smiled at his phone, the careful tilt of his hand to hide the screen from me. The next evening, when he was in the shower, I sat at his desk, staring at his laptop. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I just felt steady, like someone opening a door they'd been meaning to walk through for years. His email account was open. 1 click on drafts, and there it was. The message was unfinished, but I didn't need it to be complete to understand. "You make me feel alive again," he'd written. "Once Izzy understands, everything will fall into place." I read it twice, each word slicing cleanly through what was left of my denial. I forwarded the message to myself, attached the screenshots, and closed the laptop. Then I sat back in his chair and let the silence wash over me. It wasn't heartbreak I felt. Not anymore. It was something colder, quieter, more powerful. When he came out of the shower, towel around his waist, he looked at me and smiled like nothing had changed. "Why are you smiling like that?" he asked, trying to read me. I met his gaze, steady and calm. "Just thinking how lucky I am," I said softly, "to be married to such an enlightened man." He grinned, thinking I was teasing. "See, you're opening your mind already." I turned away before he could see the truth in my eyes. "Oh, I'm wide open now," I whispered, but not for him to hear. The next few days felt strangely clear, as if a fog had lifted and I could finally see him for who he was. Every word, every gesture, every carefully placed sigh. It all fit into the pattern now. He was still performing, still quoting his so-called philosophers of love, still pretending to guide me toward freedom. But I was done being his student. I watched him like one studies a story already spoiled by the ending. He didn't notice, of course. He thought I was softening. In truth, I was sharpening. I started noticing how he'd check his phone the moment I left the room, how he'd smile at incoming messages that I wasn't supposed to see. He became clumsy with his lies, tripping over timelines and excuses. Once, he mentioned a team dinner, but came home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine, a floral scent too delicate for restaurant air. He kissed my cheek before bed, and I almost laughed. The tenderness felt like mockery. But I smiled back, because that's what you do when you're gathering evidence. You play along. At night, when he'd fall asleep, I'd replay every moment of our marriage, like flipping through a photo album of someone else's life. I could see where the cracks had started long before I'd noticed them. The forgotten anniversaries, the distracted smiles, the half-truths said in the dark. But this time, there was no pain, only purpose. He thought he was clever for hiding in plain sight. What he didn't realize was that I had already stopped being the woman who looked away. It didn't take long before I had what I needed, not just proof, but understanding. I finally saw how he justified it all to himself, how he wrapped betrayal in poetic language so he could sleep at night. His truth was just selfishness, with better vocabulary. One evening, while he showered again, I opened his laptop and searched his sent folder. There she was, Leah, message after message. "You make me feel seen. You deserve honesty. She's stuck in old ways." I read them all, my eyes dry, my pulse steady. I forwarded every single one to myself. This time, I added the call recording app to my phone. When he came out of the bathroom, humming like a man without consequence, I smiled. "You seem happy tonight," he said, towel around his shoulders. "Just thinking," I replied, closing his laptop, "about how people evolve." His smile faltered, just for a second. I noticed it. It was the first time he realized I might not be as pliable as he thought. I kissed him goodnight, gentle and deliberate, and when he turned away, I watched him the way one studies a stranger. That night, as I lay awake beside him, I realized something I hadn't before. I wasn't the broken one here. He was. He needed validation, worship, applause. I just needed truth. And now that I had it, I also had power. What he called freedom, I was about to redefine in ways he'd never imagine. I didn't know it then, but I was already setting the stage. The shift was subtle, but it was there. I started listening differently, responding differently, moving through the house with the ease of someone who had stopped reacting and started planning. If Thomas wanted to live by his philosophy, I'd let him, just long enough for it to destroy him. I began to ask questions, careful and curious, as if I were genuinely trying to understand his newfound wisdom. "So," I said one night over dinner, "if this open relationship idea is about freedom, that means both partners have equal freedom, right?" I kept my voice light, playful, like I was finally warming to it. He hesitated, just for a second, before smiling that politician's smile of his. "Well, sure, in theory." The word theory did all the work for me. I smiled back. "Good," I said, taking a slow sip of wine. "Because I met someone at the gym. He believes in freedom too." The sound of his fork clattering against the plate was almost satisfying. He blinked, his face caught between disbelief and anger. "Wait, what? You're not serious." "Relax," I said sweetly, cutting him off. "We're just evolving, remember?" His expression twisted into something I hadn't seen before, panic disguised as rationality. He started explaining, backpedaling, insisting that it wasn't about that kind of freedom, not yet. I watched him dig his own grave with every word. That night, when he fell asleep still muttering justifications, I picked up my phone and texted Daniel, my old college friend, now a family lawyer. "We should catch up soon," I wrote. My hands didn't shake this time. I wasn't the woman being blindsided anymore. I was the one writing the next chapter. The next morning, I woke up before him, something I rarely did. The sunlight spilled across the sheets, and for the first time in months, I felt steady. There's a strange peace that comes with knowing the truth. It strips away fear, leaves only focus. While he showered, I opened my laptop and began what I knew would be a long week of quiet preparation. I gathered account details, changed passwords, redirected statements. By the time the coffee finished brewing, half of our finances were out of his reach. Freedom, I thought, had its own kind of poetry. That evening, I kept up the act. Over dinner, I brought up the topic again, just enough to keep him comfortable. "So, tell me," I said, cutting my steak slowly, "how do couples in these open arrangements handle jealousy?" His face lit up. He thought I was finally buying it. "It's about trust," he said. "Communication, boundaries." I nodded, smiling, and reached across the table to touch his hand. "That sounds beautiful," I whispered. He didn't see the flicker of irony in my eyes. He was too busy feeling validated. Later that night, after he'd fallen asleep, I sat at the edge of the bed and opened my phone. The fake email account I'd created that afternoon was ready. A few messages later, I had an appointment set with Leah. She thought I was a potential client interested in her company's marketing services. It was almost poetic. She'd stepped into my life uninvited, and now I was walking straight into hers. As I turned off the light, I couldn't help but smile. He wanted honesty. I was about to give him the most transparent lesson of his life. By the end of the week, my plan was flawless. Thomas still strutted around, certain he was the enlightened one, while I let him think I was catching up. Every conversation became a performance. I'd smile at his theories, nod at his contradictions, even feign guilt for my supposed old-fashioned mindset. He mistook my silence for surrender. It was almost endearing. How much arrogance can blind a man? When he talked about emotional transparency, I nearly laughed. Transparency was exactly what he was about to get. My meeting with Leah was set for Friday night at a sleek restaurant downtown. She confirmed with enthusiasm, her tone polite, professional, unaware. I imagined her rehearsing her smile in the mirror, the same one she used when she stole what wasn't hers. I wanted her to feel seen, the way I had felt when I read her name on his screen. But I didn't want to fight. I wanted clarity. Truth deserves an audience, and I'd chosen the perfect stage. That afternoon, I told Thomas I'd be meeting a business contact for dinner and that he was welcome to join later. He agreed instantly, eager to seem supportive. I kissed him on the cheek before leaving, letting him believe the lie. Driving there, I felt oddly calm, not nervous, not vengeful, just ready. Betrayal had taught me something he'd never understand. Power isn't about rage, it's about timing, and mine was perfect. The restaurant was everything I'd hoped for. Elegant, quiet, full of polite laughter and soft music. It was the kind of place where people pretended everything in their lives was perfect. Fitting, I thought, as I arrived early and took my seat. I wore black, simple and sharp, with just enough perfume to leave a trace in the air. When Leah entered, I recognized her instantly. She looked younger than I expected, the kind of woman who thought confidence could hide in a smile. "Isabella?" she asked, extending her hand. Her voice trembled slightly, though she didn't know why yet. "Yes," I said, smiling warmly. "Thank you for meeting me. I've heard such great things about your work." She relaxed a little, clearly flattered. We ordered wine, and as the first glass arrived, she began her rehearsed pitch about branding and communication. I nodded, pretending to listen, studying every flicker of her expression. She was good at pretending. They both were. Halfway through her sentence, my phone buzzed. I glanced down. A message from Thomas. "On my way. Can't wait to meet your mystery client." I couldn't help but smile. Timing, I thought again, really is everything. 10 minutes later, I saw him walk in. He scanned the room, expecting a stranger, not a reckoning. When his eyes landed on us, the color drained from his face. Leah's voice faltered, confusion washing over her. "Izzy?" he stammered, frozen. "Leah." I turned to him, calm, almost gentle. "Oh, good. You two already know each other," I said softly. "That saves us the introductions." His mouth opened, but no words came. For once, silence suited him. Thomas stood there, caught between denial and panic, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled out of water. Leah's eyes darted between us, confusion giving way to dread. "Izzy," he finally managed, forcing a smile that couldn't disguise the terror behind it. "This isn't what it looks like." I tilted my head, savoring the irony. "Oh, I think it's exactly what it looks like," I said quietly. "I've heard so much about your philosophy of freedom. Tell me, Thomas, does it still sound so noble now that it's sitting across from you?" Leah's face went pale. I didn't know she was your wife," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I turned to her, calm, almost compassionate. "Don't worry," I said. "He never mentioned that part. Philosophers rarely mention reality." The room around us had gone silent. The clinking of glasses, the low music, even the air itself seemed to pause. I placed my phone on the table, the screen glowing softly, and pressed play. His voice filled the space, low, intimate, unmistakable. "She's not ready for the idea yet. Give me time." Thomas's hand shot out toward the phone, but I stopped him with a look. "Freedom," I said softly, "comes with consequences, remember?" His face crumpled as the recording ended. Around us, people pretended not to listen, but every pair of eyes was on him. I picked up my glass, took a slow sip of wine, and set it down beside my wedding ring. "You wanted transparency, Thomas. I hope you enjoy how it feels." He sat there, speechless, the weight of exposure finally pressing down on him. I could see it in his posture, the slump of a man who had built his ego on deception and just watched it collapse in public. Leah couldn't meet my eyes. She looked like she wanted to disappear, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I stood slowly, smoothing my dress, and looked at Thomas one last time. "Enjoy your freedom," I said softly. "It comes with an eviction notice and frozen accounts." His mouth opened, but I didn't wait for the excuses. I'd heard enough philosophies to last a lifetime. I left the bill on the table, beside the ring he once swore symbolized eternity. It glimmered faintly under the restaurant lights, the last trace of a promise that had long since died. As I walked toward the door, I could feel the stares following me, a mixture of pity and admiration. But I didn't care about any of them. My heels clicked against the marble floor in steady rhythm, each step a quiet declaration. I was free. Not the kind of freedom he preached about, but the kind that comes from reclaiming your own narrative. Outside, the night air was cool against my skin, sharp with the scent of rain. I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I wasn't the one being explained to, corrected, or diminished. I was the lesson, and somewhere behind me, Thomas was finally learning what real evolution looked like. Not theories, not blog posts, but consequence. Months later, freedom looked nothing like I thought it would. It didn't come wrapped in grand gestures or dramatic reinventions. It arrived quietly, like sunlight slipping through the blinds on a Sunday morning. I found myself in a little cafe downtown one afternoon, the kind with scratched wooden tables and the smell of fresh pastries in the air. Daniel sat across from me, smiling that calm lawyer smile of his, the one that always made me feel like the world wasn't such a terrible place. "You look lighter," he said, stirring his coffee. I laughed. "That's because I am. I finally dropped about 180 pounds of dead weight." He chuckled, raising an eyebrow. "So, still into those open relationship philosophies?" I smirked, swirling the foam on top of my latte. "Absolutely," I said. "My heart's open, to peace, success, and people who don't quote blog posts to justify cheating." He nearly spit out his coffee, and I laughed, really laughed, the kind that fills your chest instead of breaking it. For the first time in years, my laughter didn't feel like a performance. It felt like living. As I sat there, sunlight catching the rim of my cup, I realized something Thomas never did. Freedom isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about not needing permission to be yourself. It's about breathing without waiting for someone else to tell you it's okay. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't just understand that. I embodied it. Healing wasn't dramatic. It didn't come in a single moment of revelation or some cinematic montage. It came in small, ordinary ways. The first night I slept through without dreaming of confrontation. The morning I woke up and didn't check my phone out of habit. The day I finally moved his things out without feeling anger. I stopped asking why. I stopped replaying every conversation, trying to pinpoint the exact second love turned into calculation. I simply released it. It's strange how peaceful it feels when you stop fighting for someone who never fought for you. Daniel and I started seeing each other more often. Dinners, long walks, simple company. He never tried to fix me or fill the silence. He just existed beside me, steady and kind. Once, as we walked by the river, he said, "You know, Izzy, you're the calmest storm I've ever met." I smiled, understanding what he meant. I wasn't angry anymore, just clear. Betrayal hadn't broken me, it had refined me. Every scar had become a signature of survival, proof that I could lose everything and still be entirely myself. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if Thomas ever tells the story, if he paints himself as the victim of a woman too proud to forgive. Maybe he does. Maybe he needs that version to sleep at night. But I've stopped caring about the story he tells. The only truth that matters now is the one I live. And in that truth, I am free. Not because I walked away from him, but because I finally walked toward myself. One morning, I found myself standing by the window with a cup of coffee, watching the world wake up. The city felt alive. People hurrying to work, dogs tugging their leashes, laughter spilling from a bakery across the street. It was ordinary, and yet for me, it felt like rebirth. There was no grand plan, no quest for perfection, just the calm certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. I used to think freedom meant escape. Now I know it's something quieter, something internal, the absence of fear. Later that day, I walked past a bookstore and saw a display in the window. Modern Love, Rethinking Relationships. The title made me smile. I stepped inside, picked up the book, and flipped through the pages. It was full of the same empty theories Thomas used to recite, dressed up as enlightenment. I closed it gently and set it back. I didn't need anyone else's definition anymore. Mine was enough. As I left the store, I caught my reflection in the glass. Older, wiser, softer somehow. Not broken, not bitter, just free. I thought of Thomas and his so-called evolution, his endless search for justification. He wanted freedom without consequence, and in the end, I gave him both.